Napalapa Kirivaratari Yatsodanandana Prachachanaranjana Yasodhanandana Prachachanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Haribo Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhagavatam 7.11.21 Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesh Sunyavadi Paschacha Deshatayame Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesh Sunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The Srimad Bhagavatam verses that we'll be looking at today are Canto 7, Chapter 11, and the text 21 through 24. And 21 is the one on the board. It's one that has the purport. And okay. All right. So we can chant together text 21. Samodamas tapaha socham santoshaha shantir ajavam Gyanam jaya chutatmatvam Sattvam cha brahma lakshanam Samodamas tapaha socham Santosha Shantirajavam Gyanam Dayachutatmatvam Satyam Cha Brahmalakshanam Samodamas Tapaha Socham Shantosha Shantirajavam Gyanam Dayachutatmatvam Satyam Cha Brahmalakshanam. Please chant. Santosha Shantirajavam Gyanam Dayachutatmatvam Satyam Cha Brahmalakshanam. Samodamastapasocham Santosha Shantirajavam Gyanam Dayachutatmatvam Satyam Cha Brahmalakshanam. Okay. So the word for word, of course, the translation purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shamaha, control of the mind. Dhammaha, control of the senses. Tapaha, austerity and penance. Socham, cleanliness. Shantaha, satisfaction. Shantihi, forgiveness, being unagitated by anger. Arjavam, simplicity. Jnanam, knowledge. Daya, mercy. Achuta Atmatvam, accepting oneself as an eternal servant of the Lord. Satyam, truthfulness. Cha, also. Brahma Lakshanam, the symptoms of a Brahmana. Translation. The symptoms of a Brahmana are control of the mind, control of the senses, austerity and penance, cleanliness, satisfaction, forgiveness, simplicity, knowledge, mercy, truthfulness, and complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. In the institution of Anashram Dharma, the symptoms of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas are all described. The ultimate aim is Achutat Matvam, to think always of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu. To make advancement in Krishna consciousness, one has to become a Brahmana with the above-mentioned symptoms. So I'll read the next verses, and then I'm going to concentrate actually on 21. So the next verses are Soryam Varyam Dartis Tejas Tyagas Chatma Jaha Shama Brahmanyata Prasadascha Satyam Cha Kshetra Lakshanam. To be influential in battle, unconquerable, patient, challenging, and charitable, to control the bodily necessities, to be forgiving, to be attached to the Brahmanical nature, and to be always jolly and truthful. These are the symptoms of the Kshatriya. The next text, which is 22. Deva Guru Achuta Bhattis Trivarga Pariposhanam Ashikyam Udayamo Nityam Naipunyam Vaishya Lakshanam. Being always devoted to the demigods, the spiritual master, and the Supreme Lord Vishnu, endeavoring for advancement in religious principles, economic development, and sense gratification, dharma, artha, and karma, believing in the words of the spiritual master and scripture, and always endeavoring with expertise in earning money. These are the symptoms of the Vaishya. And then text 24. Sudrasya Sanatihi Snucham Seva Swamini Ayaya Anmatra Gyano Hi Asteyam Satyam Go Vipra Rakshanam. Translation: offering obeisances to the highest sections of society, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, being always very clean, being free from duplicity, serving one's master, performing sacrifices without uttering mantras, and not stealing, always speaking the truth, and giving all protection to the cows and Brahmanas. These are the symptoms of the Sudra. Purport: it is everyone's experience that workers or servants are generally accustomed to stealing. A first-class servant is one who does not steal. Here it is recommended that a first-class Sudra must remain very clean, must not steal or speak lies, and must always render service to the master. A Sudra may attend sacrifices and Vedic ritualistic ceremonies along with his master, but he should not utter the mantras, for these may be uttered only by the members of the higher sections of society. Unless one is completely pure and has been raised to the standard of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, in other words, unless one is Dvija, twice born, the chanting of mantras will not be fruitful. Okay, so somehow this class, when I was thinking about it, the emphasis for me moved to the first verse. Because actually one could go into some detail also on the one following it in terms of the Kshatriyas, but somehow I chose to put my focus on text 21 with its purport. So Srila Prabhupada says that the ultimate aim is to think always of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Vishnu, Achutat Matvam. So Srila Prabhupada also adds that to advance in Krishna consciousness, one needs to become a Brahmana with the above-mentioned symptoms, which is so the presence of these symptoms, which are listed in this particular verse, and there's a long list of them, control of the mind, control of the senses, austerity and penance, cleanliness, satisfaction, forgiveness, simplicity, knowledge, mercy, truthfulness, and complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if these symptoms are present, this would indicate the existence of a Brahmanical state. So the corollary is there too. So sometimes one is interested to know how one is doing in one's Krishna consciousness, and how much closer one has actually moved towards this aim of always thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I mean, one would like a measure, one would want to know. And indeed, it's actually useful to look at whether these symptoms are beginning to be present and if we really have moved forward. So, so I'm thinking to look at something of these symptoms to do such an examination. So, if we examine whether the symptom of control of the mind is there, we would have to examine what we're up against, first of all, to think if how we're doing. So there's a simile that's used that's trying to capture the mind, which is difficult, is like trying to capture the blowing wind. So we're up against something very difficult, so we have to have that clear right away. So this you'll find in the in Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter, the 34th verse, where that particular simile is used. So the reason this is so is because the mind this is the description of the mind. It's restless, it's turbulent, it's obstinate, and it's very strong. So this is what one is up against. So, and there's words that are used in that 6th chapter in the 34th verse. Chanchalam is the Sanskrit word that's used, which refers to the mind being flickering. It's like, you have a light that's the bulb is about to go, and it's like this. It's very irritating. You just want to switch it off, or else, remove the bulb and put in a fresh one that's going to glow brightly. The mind is that irritating. It's flickering. So, and then there's Auramati Tattva Balavat, very strong, and Dirdam, obstinate. So, it's going to have its way no matter what. Very obstinate. You may find, you sometimes see a child that is very insistent on something, and it will, the child will scream, dig its heels in, until, and it'll stop crying the minute it gets what it wants. The mind is like that. It's obstinate. It's going to demand and demand and demand and stamp its feet until it gets what it wants. So this is something of the mind. You've got that kind of toddler child present within. So Narada Muni describes the nature of the mind, and he says that he uses this word vishuchina, meaning going everywhere. So it's going everywhere. It goes there, it goes there, it goes there. Like at any moment, if one sits down and thinks, I'm going to relax, the mind may travel to a distant time when one was on vacation, and some scene will come up of a beach and some seawater. Then immediately after that, the mind associates something with that, and one recalls that somebody was wearing a blue garment, and then the mind will jump to a blue pair of trousers that one has in one's wardrobe. I mean, it goes everywhere. It's traveled from the beach to one's wardrobe, and then next minute it may hopefully remember to travel to the temple room too. But yes, Krishna today was wearing a blue dress or blue garment. So the mind goes everywhere. So this is how Narada Muni describes it. This is what you're up against when you're evaluating how much control has come. So first we have to understand what we're dealing with. So now, on top of that, within the mind, the living entity is actually enjoying the effects of the modes of material nature. So it means whatever one is associating with, that's what's prominent in the mind at any time. So, yes, well, I'll give this example because externally it was visible, so it was clear also what was going on internally. I was standing at the train station one day recently, and a man suddenly presented himself right in front of me, and I don't know what he said because I was just appalled at his condition with a sort of swollen eye, and he saw that I wasn't responding to whatever he said. I didn't even hear. He then turned to somebody else, and then he announced that I'm a gangster. So I'm a gangster and I've had a fight. So in his mind was prominent, how he identified with himself and the particular whatever went along with that identification. So so his mode, he was associating with a particular mode of nature, the mode of ignorance, fighting, winning something, because his next statement was predictable. I lost this fight. So, you see sometimes the external workings of the mind and the effects of the modes of material nature that are within the mind. So Narada Muni actually says that these effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. So clearly this particular person was under some illusion because he's in this terrible condition, but he was announcing, I'm a gangster, with some pride. So, and that particular description of Narada Muni's comes in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 29th chapter, the 16th verse. So in effect, the modes of nature are acting on the heart and mind. Even though one is thinking of oneself as the doer of the activities. So that man was thinking, I had the fight, not realizing that his association is with the modes of nature. So he's associating with that identification of being a gangster, and the modes of nature then act upon him. So it took a particular course, clearly. So, of course, that leads one to understand that if you actually want to talk about who's doing the activity, it's actually the modes of nature. One's not in control. He is forced to have that fight in whatever scenario he's in. The modes of nature, allowing him to associate with a particular group of people where there's, obviously some sort of friction that must go on constantly. So material nature is the doer of the activity. He was not the one who did the fighting. He was forced to be in a situation that he had to fight for something or other. So now going back to our evaluation of how well we're doing with trying to control the mind. We turn to the method that we're employing to try and control the mind, and that method is given by Lord Chaitanya, which is the chanting of the Maha Mantra. And it's not merely chanting, but there's certain ways in which, in a mood with which one has to be doing it. So that's with humility, particularly. As Lord Chaitanya puts it, Trinad api sunichana taror eva sahishnuna amanina manidena kirtaniya sadahari. Say in all humility means that there's an absence of pride or that self-assertion. So, which means the assertion of the ego. That has to be absent when one is chanting. So, whatever one's identifying with in terms of that false ego, because it means one is forgetting the ego of, I'm spirit soul, or I'm spirit, that has to be absent. It has to be put aside. And now, in looking at this humility aspect, it always gets lumped together with pridelessness. Humility and pridelessness go together, and this is something I've heard from my spiritual master. And he actually has defined it this way, which I found very nice. Humility is how we see ourselves. For example, thinking of ourselves, how Lord Chaitanya has just stated it in the verse that I've read, thinking of ourselves as having the tolerance of trees. So it's like a different concept of oneself. No longer are you thinking of, the label, that ego identification label, gangster, whatever. Of course, we wouldn't be thinking that with chanting, but rather it's thinking of the way in which one is functioning, the quality with which one is functioning. So it's going to a deeper level. So one is thinking of oneself as having the tolerance of a tree. So a much deeper way of approaching things, the quality with which you approach something. So, of course, one knows why a tree is tolerant. It's standing there patiently, the snow is falling, then rain is coming, and sometimes that water is freezing, and it has to stand there with the branches frozen. It's standing there. So, now, looking at that testing of how one is doing, again, in being able to control the mind, it's in proportion to the amount that one is genuinely able to see the protection of Krishna. So this is difficult. It requires a little bit of contemplation. How much is one seeing genuinely the protection of Krishna? So you can see how it's different from somebody who's not having any clue that there's protection by Krishna, hasn't taken to looking for some shelter other than the ego. There, in the example of the gangster, the shelter is the concept of self. Here, the shelter is, how is Krishna protecting me? So very big switch in understanding. So, and the extent to which one is seeing that protection is the extent to which one is able to actually approach chanting with that kind of mood or quality of humility. So Narada, I looked at his teaching since he's the speaker of these verses. He actually puts it that generally devotees are seeing Krishna as the protector. It's a general understanding. It's our view of Krishna, our understanding of Krishna. So when we're chanting, we need to be conscious of that he's protecting one. So any effort one is making, there's support coming for that effort. So this particular point is augmented when one is actually understanding also how great Krishna is. So there's a feeling of, or there's an acknowledgement of the greatness of Krishna. So it goes along with, it's very conscious. One has to acknowledge Krishna and, of course, his greatness. So, and the more that's there, the more there are feelings of humility. So that's the test. One's acknowledgement of the greatness of Krishna, one's understanding of his protection. So it's very good to keep, what would be the word, a kind of mental record of the many times in which one received protection of Krishna. One attempts to do something and it seems completely impossible, and somehow either Krishna's protection is there and it gets done, and one acknowledges that. So every time one does that, it drives it home that actually it was due to Krishna's protection that this could be done, something that was so difficult that seemed so impossible. And so that increases those feelings of humility. So in relation to Krishna, I'm so grateful that he's actually giving this kind of assistance. And this comes into the chanting, that means of controlling the mind. So you're bringing that in there when you sit down to chant or walk to chant. So now, when there's feelings of humility, the other test that's there is to what extent is that anxiety to be honored by others falling away. When one is conscious that one's walking around with that desire to receive honor from others, in fact, there's an anxiety for it, then one understands that actually it's not humility that's there, there's material deception. So it means the self that's been asserted is that ego self. I'm the gangster, or I am deserving of honor. I'm so special, like that. So now pridelessness is how we see things in relation to ourselves. So to understand that one has this position of dependence on Krishna, automatically pride starts falling away. So that's where pridelessness is connected to the humility. So the implication is that when one is able to move pride out of the way, that symptom of knowledge of humility and pridelessness is there. So pride has to be shifted out of the way. And one becomes very conscious of this over time. When one is able to actually chant the means for controlling the mind is not featuring much. That mechanism, so to speak, of controlling the mind, of chanting the Maha Mantra, is working beautifully when the pride is not there. So there's a nice book, Satyaraj, who had the good fortune of knowing in my early days as a devotee in New York City, put a book together where he did a series of talks on the Shikshashtakam in the New York Public Library. So he comments in relation to this that it actually isn't an easy accomplishment. But this is what it takes to enter into the mysteries of the holy name. All this work that I've just been describing. So I'm going to read one of our great acharyas, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who just in one statement epitomizes this combination of humility and pridelessness. Everything I've described, I just thought it gets captured nicely. Very simple statement, but it captures something of this humility and pridelessness, and it's from Sri Bhajan Rahasya, where he's showing how he sees Lord Chaitanya as the protector of the devotees, and also he's showing that absence of pride. So here's his statement, very simple. But one can't make such a simple statement unless these elements are there. When will the son of Sachimata appear within the path of my eyes? He has accepted the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, who are like bees at his lotus feet, as his personal associates. Like a father, he gave them instructions to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, counting a fixed number of rounds. Such a simple statement, but to be able to make such a statement where he's understanding Lord Chaitanya and what he's done, no pride, complete humility. He's seen himself in relation to Lord Chaitanya. That's the whole reality. Very simple statement, very beautiful, I thought. So then this leads to another item listed by Narada Muni as a symptom of a Brahmana, and that is of cleanliness. So Srila Prabhupada particularly states, when one looks in Bhagavad Gita, where the qualities of a Brahmana are listed, that cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life, both the external one and the internal. So that seems easy enough to do, because the external one, one takes a physical bath, so one is sloughing off dead skin cells or toxins are being washed away. So, and then the internal one is that chanting of the Maha Mantra, that's the cleansing. And always thinking of Krishna. Since this is what is cleansing the accumulated karma from the mind. So the one is the dead skin cells, the toxins. The other is all those reactions that are stored in the mind, they're getting washed away. So, and that's again through the chanting. So the cleanliness again goes back to chanting. That's the method. So not soap, the Maha Mantra. So now this karma is in the form of material desires. And particularly that these material desires, they get lumped together where one's like trying to master material nature. Those are material desires. You're going to control something, you're going to manage something, you're going to accumulate material possessions, means you're going to be master of material nature. So the cleansing is of those material desires which are filling the heart, because that's where the cleansing is going on in the heart. So in physical cleansing, the result may be a radiant skin, freshly scrubbed. So while the cleansing of the heart is that the thoughts are no longer of material things. Yeah, it's subtle. It's a shift. So complete cleansing is that of coming to a perfect state whereby one is constantly seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's so clean internally that now Krishna is residing there. You've really cleaned it up. He's actually living there. So that is the perfection of the cleansing, and it goes on. So now the seating of the Lord within the heart doesn't allow for any more dirt. You're like completely clean now. Because the material modes are kept away. So there's no more association with the material modes. So this means that prior to the cleansing, or this complete cleansing, the mind desired so many material things. But after the complete cleansing and the perception, because you perceive the Lord within the heart, the material desires vanish. So at that time, the devotee can think of Lord Krishna constantly. That's when it's possible. So this was mentioned as one of the qualities of the Brahmana. So you can see how one's getting there, or at least it's the symptom of a Brahmana. So in this way, the Brahmana comes to have that dependence on Lord Krishna. So there's the dependence in using the method. There's the dependence on Lord Krishna for helping with the cleansing. And then finally, when Krishna is residing there, there's dependence on him because he's keeping all the other dirt away. The material modes can't touch one. So complete dependence. So, so here's Narada Muni describing something of this. I'm going to read the Sanskrit. It's a little difficult, this one, somehow. He's talking to the Prajetas. So he says, and this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 4th canto, the 31st chapter, and the 20th verse. Apahata sakalai sanamalatmani aviratam edita bhavanopa hutuhu nija jana vasa gatvam atmanoyan nasharati chidravat akshara shatamhi. Being completely cleansed of all material desires, the devotees are freed from all material contamination. Thus, they can always think of the Lord constantly and address him very feelingly. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing himself to be controlled by his devotee, does not leave them for a second, just as the sky overhead never becomes invisible. So, nice comparison here. One doesn't ever really think of the sky, takes the sky for granted. I mean, you look up sometimes and you're sometimes aware, yes, the sky is there. But the sky never becomes invisible, even if you're not glancing at it. And so in the same way, Narada Muni is saying, Lord Krishna stays there in the hearts. He's constantly there. He doesn't leave for a second, just as the sky doesn't. So this particular symptom of a Brahmana that's brought up in this text that we chanted together, this constant thinking of the Lord and complete surrender and dependence is also seen in a particular prayer. And I'm going to read it. O son of Maharaj Nanda, I am your eternal servant, yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So this brings us back to the symptom of the Brahmana, the humility of how one thinks of oneself. So please be merciful. So one's appealing because one understands there's dependence. Please be merciful and allow me to be a particle of dust at your lotus feet. So the approach isn't direct. One's not demanding in the same way, like in material, when one's dealing with material things, one demands, I want this particular object or I want control of that particular space. But this is, particle of dust. It's so, one really sees oneself not approaching directly, but rather wanting to serve somebody who's already serving somebody else who's already serving somebody who's serving somebody else, you're serving Krishna. So a whole line of persons are ahead of one, and one's quite happy with that position. Uh, so the symptom of knowledge, or the symptom for the person who's a brahmana would be displaying, is this mental attitude. I'm approaching Krishna as a particle of dust, so light, so not important. So this is a very difficult thing. So that's why I guess I've looked at this particular verse, because it's the most difficult of all the symptoms. So whatever symptom one has, these that are listed here, or even for the Kshatriya, all the symptoms that were listed, which are pretty self-explanatory. So whatever particular section of society one's in, every person needs to think that he's been engaged in his particular occupation by the master, Krishna, and that the results of the work are the way in which Krishna can be worshipped. Person has to think like that. It doesn't matter which section of society, all the ones that we read, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, the Sudra. That means that one's using one's energy in that kind of way. And in each of those sections, the symptoms that are described here, but the person is approaching it with that mental view that I'm using my energy in this way, it allows, and this is a very simple thing, but it's so great, it allows one to become aware of everything. That's how Srila Prabhupada makes a blanket statement. It allows for a complete awareness. And that's actually the perfection of each of the persons with their particular symptoms by which they're working, but just having that understanding that the results of their work are something that whereby Krishna can be worshipped. So it's very important to have that idea. So a complete contrast to the poor person I used in an earlier example, where there's not that understanding. So the person's completely at the mercy of the modes of material nature, and there isn't the spiritual progress and increased awareness of how everything is fitting together so perfectly and beautifully. So these were some thoughts. If anybody has a thought they'd like to share in relation to the discussion or what I've chosen to focus on this morning. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for
Hare
your class. You made a lot of nice points. One particular point you made is that you were mentioning that when children, when they, of course, get what they want, if they're throwing a temper tantrum, they're peaceful. So that kind of reminds me of a statement that Radhanath Maharaj, in regards to what you said, confirming the point. He said something to the extent that when raising children, it's not good to give them everything they want, because when children are accustomed to getting everything they want, then when they grow up, they're going to have the same conditioning. But the problem is, when we're adults, we don't always get what we want whenever we want, like respect or etc. Anything. There's so many building. So my question is that can you elaborate on a point that as practicing devotees, I mean, it's obviously detrimental. How detrimental is it to always try to get our way? Because we can see that things are outside our control. Like one philosopher, he says, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not. And what's not within our control is how people's circumstances treat us. We have reversals in life. People, insult us. People maybe unintentionally too. So, can you explain for our own benefit, like, what are some steps we could do to I don't know, this kind of weird question to avoid getting in our way. Like, how do we avoid, getting in our way? Like, I want to, do this, but maybe I shouldn't because I'll get accustomed to that. So, what are some steps we could do to avoid always getting in our way? It's kind of a weird question, but
So, your question implies that within the mind there's a certain learned pattern which was unfortunately put in place by one's parents. And that pattern can be I demand and I must get, and preferably as soon as possible. And I have a right to it too. So this unfortunate pattern is there in the mind, and as an adult, obviously one's going to run into difficulties if that pattern's in the mind when one's dealing with others, because with maturation should come the understanding that actually there's a time delay between a demand and getting the result of that demand. So in helping that condition or that pattern that is already existing in the mind, one wants to see how one can break that pattern or, change it. And that's a big challenge because it's not only that kind of pattern, but there's all kinds of unfortunate patterns that get put into place through interactions in growing up, or even dealing with others other than one's parents, but somebody that one deals with a lot. It establishes the pattern in the mind. So, how to break such a pattern? Well, the first is certainly the acknowledgement of the existence of the pattern is a huge step. And the second is learning that comes from actually acting on that pattern. So one puts it into practice as an adult. One demands something from another person, and then to one's surprise, the pattern gets challenged. The other person naturally is not going to either appreciate the mood or perhaps the pressure put on them, or perhaps the expectation that's made of them. So another adult person can help that pattern in the mind to break, and particularly a devotee, because a devotee will actually understand that the mind is pushing the person to act in that kind of demanding way. So the devotee will actually either draw the person's attention to this particular pattern. If they have that kind of relationship, like, are you aware that there's this pattern in the mind that causes you to, make excessive demands or frequent demands that are perhaps unreasonable? And if there's not that kind of relationship, at least the devotee will sanely deal with one. So the devotee may actually just say to one, there's this, right now is not the time when this demand can be met. So you may have to wait. 3 days from now is when I will get round to being able to take this and this step in order to meet that demand. And on your part, what's necessary is to help me in this process, in this and this kind of way. So the devotee will approach it with intelligence. And that starts to train the mind. So one can also start absorbing how devotees in particular are dealing with one, because that you can use that approach also with your own mind. So observing the way in which the devotee is dealing with you and trying to implement something of that same way with your intelligence, tackle the mind and use the same approach. No, this cannot be done at this time. There's got to be a time lapse. 3 days from now is when this need can be taken care of, and there are certain steps that need to be gone through in order for that need to be met. So kindly step into the background. Do not behave in this obnoxious way. Just stay behind there. We're going to proceed in this kind of way. So you're using your intelligence to tackle the mind, and it can be learnt a lot by the interactions one has with devotees, because they'll certainly use a lot of intelligence in how they deal with excessive demands coming from somebody that clearly is an indication of the mind being out of control.
Thank you very much. One brief follow-up of that question. How important is it to, before you get in a circumstance, a reversal or some mistreat you, because Vandanam prayers is part of our process. So usually we don't mind praying for somebody's failure, especially if they disrespect us. We may not call it prayer, but sometimes wishing for some people to, okay, they disrespected me or they mistreated me. I hope they, whatever. So, but how important is it? Because maybe, from the various Shiksha and Disha gurus and hearing how important that I've learned from it, I feel like has helped me also. How important is it to pray before you get in any circumstance like that? Okay, Lord, please, obviously, like you were mentioning, we can't control the mind. Only Krishna can control the wind, the sun, the moon. We can't control our mind, our senses. So only Krishna can. So how important is it to pray to Krishna before we get in any circumstance, every day? Or can you elaborate on that? Is that important, or should that be our daily meditation? Please, Krishna, help me get through the day. Treat everyone with honor, respect, regardless of how they treat me. So how important is that? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it certainly is important because then you're acknowledging your dependence on Krishna. So that acknowledgement of dependence goes a long way for Krishna actually giving the intelligence to not be so dependent on the respect and honor coming from others. There'll be a reminder of some kind. Oh, that pattern's there again. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Krishna, for reminding me. Yes. So prayer, yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Bhad ki jai.